difficult to make a home of.
Of the principal towns of Guyana and their wives.
Hello, it's Cardiac Champagne here, and welcome to Black History Month. We're going to start with Black British history. With the rise of immigration in Britain in the 50s and 60s, with black and Asian people coming over from the Commonwealth countries, it directly enforced strong objection from the white British public. Hence the rise of the National Front and provident people such as ENOCH Powell coming to the front line to defend the country.
What about these Indian shops? They break in the law all the time. Take action against them in case I'm accused of racial prejudice.
Yeah, but now I'm being driven out.
The immigrants should be dispersed from this area.
Indian camps being built over her grave in years to come.
We can't go into the locals anymore. They're full up with noisy foreigners, and we don't like it. We haven't got a place left where we, the English people, can go and enjoy ourselves in this town.
Well, black, it will lie.
Enoch Powell was well aware of the impact his speech would have.
A black man will have the whip hand over the white man. And that means 15 or 20 additional families.
In 1960, didn't share the following words. Enoch Powell said, "As I look ahead, I'm filled with foreboding. Like the Roman, I seem to see the river Tiber foaming with much blood." The next day, Enoch Powell was sacked from the Conservative shadow cabinet by Ted Heath. There was outrage and protests on both sides of the argument.
OSWARD MOSLEY, man behind the British fascist The National Front idolised people like him because of his direct view on race. Here's Oswald Mosley in a movie documentary.
Mr. Shelby, I see the green. The change is coming. You've come past it. Mr. Shelby, will we join the others? Have some business. You are tribe of gypsies. And with
What's fascism?
I will have need of men like you.
That with the dawn of a new decade,
Except, of course,
there were no place I would rather lie.
when I hear that man Mosley speak, I see the green shoots of another war growing up around his feet.
This great country.
I have known that the change is coming. Anything like
No, the British Empire badly exploited black and Asian countries. The British Empire is deeply rooted in racism, as they do not think anything of black and Asian Commonwealth countries. But the royal family had capitalised and exploited black and Asian countries.
Here at Kingston's Heroes Park, the Queen experienced the novelty of meeting someone even older than her mother. Clark is very nearly 108 and signed up with the British West Indies Regiment in 1916. He remembers when George...
How did you feel meeting the Queen today, Pa?
I'm feeling happy. So me,
Yes.
Tragically, it was
was the royal welcome enjoyed by the Queen and Duke in the National Stadium. Visitors were attending a mass rally of Jamaican youth. That's right.
This scene depicts the Queen, Her Royal Highness, a posh banquet, and where the Queen engages in the act of dance with a black Guyana man in the days of the British Empire. This scene is taken from the Crown TV series and is a factual depiction of a real event.
Foxtrot, sir.
Definitely quite scandalous.
Looking back in history, feeling guilty for stuff that none of us in this era actually did, having to say sorry for everything that we didn't do, and even now, apparently having to pay people today for stuff that happened to their ancestors many generations before. I don't really get what that achieves.
We should learn from lessons of the past.
His son Harry, 3 years, had branded the royal family a bunch of callous racists. That is, they're racist, these people, and yet they...
So first and foremost, my feelings on the royal family and racism are not predicated on Harry and Meghan's willingness to identify. That's the difference between me and you. We are talking about a country that was built off of racism, and we are referring to the oldest institution in this country that started it all. So that's the first thing. In terms of why black people and many others feel the way that we do, well, the monarchy is a symbol of white supremacy. Okay? White supremacy. That is the reason.
Why does it make any difference if King Charles says sorry? Or why does it make if he pays?
So reparation.
How does that combat racism?
No, it actually does. So let me.
The guy hasn't got a racist bone in his body. He's done more for racism than any public figure in the country. Why should he be paying for the sins of people hundreds of years ago?
Okay, so can I finish?
Yes.
Thank you very much. So, the monarchy is a symbol of white supremacy, which is what black people have had to contend with for the last 400 years, notwithstanding the fact that Elizabeth, or every king and queen, from Elizabeth I.
You think the last late queen was a model of white supremacy?
Let me finish my point. You just asked me several questions. Let me finish my point.
Answer the question.
Right, I'm getting there, so just finish.
Well, hurry up.
Just finish, okay?
Hurry up.
So, every king and queen from Elizabeth I to William IV has supported and profited off of slavery. So, this is about the fact that this country was built off of racism, and that's
this country also led.
This country.
You can't just keep talking.
No, because I haven't even finished my point.
You can't just make outlandish statements about our royal family and not expect me to jump in.
Finish. You keep interrupting. Can I finish my point?
This country also led the world out of slavery.
Okay, so can I finish my point?
A long time ago.
Can I finish my point, please?
Yes, he's finished it.
I will. No problem. Just be patient. So, every single king and queen from Elizabeth I to William IV over a 270-year period supported the enslavement of Africans and profited as a result. So, it doesn't take any genius. Hold on a second. It doesn't take a genius to figure out that this country was built off of racism and it stems from white supremacy, all of which is directly attributed to the crown, slavery, and colonialism. To answer your point, let me finish my point.
Keep talking.
Piers, you keep interrupting.
Answer my question.
Let's have a conversation.
Answer my question.
Let's have a conversation. Here, guys. You spoke about slavery. Let me answer the point.
I asked you a specific question. Why should King Charles be either apologising for what happened centuries ago or paying money for it?
Okay, so what you're talking about...
People had slaves.
So, what we're talking about,
right?
Exactly. So, we're not talking about
slavery around today.
So I'll tell you what I'm talking about. I'm talking about colonialism, neo-colonialism. This is the racist system of oppression and exploitation of black people and white supremacists, which have been rebanded under the...
What's that got to do with King Charles?
I am telling you why he needs to apologise and pay reparations.
What did he do?
Anything to do with slavery.
What did he do?
I'm telling you, colonialism, neo-colonialism,
he didn't do that.
Racial disparities in a racist system and white supremacist attributes. That is the legacies of the crown, slavery, and colonialism that still remains.
I understand.
Let me finally get my point across. Lord,
you've got your point across, but here's my point, my counterpoint to you. What's any of that got to do with King Charles, who actually has been, I think, one of the great standard bearers in royal history for actually promoting racial equality and tackling racial injustice?
So let me
you want him to be issuing grovelling apologies for people hundreds of years ago, and you want him to pay money.
Okay, so I think black people would be far more inclined to get over it wasn't for the fact that the legacies of the crown, slavery, and colonialism still remain, which includes racism, racial disparities, and the racist global system of oppression and exploitation of black people.
All right, you're not answering my question.
I am, but you don't want to accept it. That's different.
No,
That is a
you haven't explained
You also have the wealth of economic expansion as a result of exploitation of black people. And you also have
let's test the speak now.
Hold on. You haven't even let me finish this. No problem. No problem.
You've done 9/10 of the talk.
No, you didn't let me
Tessa,
finish.
you've heard the debate.
I think you're both wrong.
Because
it's an institution of state.
Do I have to? All right.
He's talked about sorry.
Excuse me. Time out.
You keep talking about slavery. Let's just be clear about slavery. Yes, you did end slavery. You've made that point and you've made that point, so let me address it. You did end slavery, and there was a clause in the contract that said, for example, exploit black people and do it in a far
agree, Iman.
There are also. Excuse me. Can we all stop talking about the biggest problem with slavery right now? That is not as a result of white supremacy causing modern day slavery. I would want slavery issues than going back in the past, as we now do with, we now go back in the past for everything, wallowing in self-guilt about stuff that had nothing to do with us.
You ignored that conveniently.
This is such a negative. This is a
negative going back how far? How far do you want to go back?
400 years back.
I think the Vikings should be paying me money for what they did to me.
So you're talking about slavery. I'm talking about colonialism.
It's not slavery. You're not listening to me.
Yes, I am.
My ancestors.
Empire and slavery.
Should Italians and
Iman, in one sentence.
Go ahead.
What do you want? In one sentence. What's your idea?
Thank you, Tessa.
Money.
You want money?
You want money.
You want money. Okay.
In Elizabeth II, that the Mau Mau uprising against British colonial rule started. As many as 90,000 Kenyans were killed or tortured. More than 160,000 were forced into concentration camps during 8 years of mayhem and bloodshed, down by British colonial forces, sowing the seeds for Kenyan independence in 1963. Years of fighting for justice, there was a breakthrough in 2013. More than 5,000 Kenyans who'd been subjected to torture and in the 1950s won compensation from the British government.
Not many people know that Britain had colonized Kenya, and Kenya was a part of the British Empire, but there's a dark legacy to do with Kenya and concentration camps, as many black Kenyans was tortured graphically and died in concentration camps set up by the British. No, Winston Churchill was directly behind the graphic acts of genocide in the Black Continent. 7 years after Adolf Hitler lost the war to the British, Winston Churchill set up concentration camps, the same in Nazi Germany, in the Black Continent of Africa. Britain had set up concentration camps in Kenya after the Second World War. Look at the barbed wire. These are real photographs and act as evidence. Factual accounts of the bad, graphic, brutal, inhumane that Britain had done to black Kenyans underneath the days of the Empire. When Kenya was a part of the British Empire, this was the flag that Kenya had, with the Union Jack and a lion to represent Great Britain.
Sir Winston Leonard Spencer Churchill was the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom from October 1951 through April 1955. And although it may be what he is most famous for, he was much more than the British bulldog.
Kenya wanted it to be independent from Britain, so started rebellion movement known as the Maui Maui, a group of Kenyan tribal people who challenged the British Empire and did not want to be under British rule. Great Britain didn't like that and reacted violently towards the black Kenyans, with Winston Churchill in charge, driving the British Army and setting up concentration camps in Kenya.
Well, I'm joined now by Iman Ayton, who's organised her own Black Lives Matter protests, including the likes of actor John Boyega and Madonna, and royal historian and author Sir Anthony Selden. So welcome to both of you. Winston Churchill was a national hero who saved us from the Nazis, and that was it. But now he's not, and I'll start, Imam, by saying this. I understand why young people look back at some of the things that Churchill was recorded as saying, some of the views that he held, and I understand why it may colour the judgment about him, literally, actually. But I also believe you should take all great figures in totality.
I agree.
Whether it's Gandhi, Mandela, Churchill, whoever it may be. And the welter of positives for Winston Churchill, to me, outweigh attitudes and occasional comments which were by far the norm of that era and wouldn't be tolerated today. And what's your reaction to that?
I totally agree with you. So I don't actually harp on the covert racism or the kind of, the comments like black people are savages and Indians are a beastly race. I don't actually hold on to that because you're right. It was during those times, not that it's acceptable. We can safely say it wasn't. What I hold on to, for example, is yes, he was a hero. I think I was given the same kind of narrative that most people were, that this is a British hero. Admittedly, it was only when I saw Churchill was a racist, that graffiti that was written on his statue during Black Lives Matter, that prompted me as a random person to say, you know what, I'm going to go home and research Churchill. And in doing that, I found the two things that resonated with me personally. The first was the 4 million Indians that died due to the Bengal famine, which was a direct result of Winston Churchill's decision making. The second would have to be, hold on.
No, okay.
Fair enough.
But on that, I'll come back to you because that is simply not true.
Okay, you can
the mythology that's built up around what happened, and I'll let the great historian fill in the blanks here. But there's a lot of mythology that's been fermenting about Churchill's culpability over the Bengal famine. Apart from anything else, he didn't cause the famine. The famine was caused by a cyclone. It was then massively exacerbated by a failure to get resource and food because of Japan's stranglehold on the area, and so on and so on. Churchill did direct other countries, including America and Australia, to try and send grain to Bengal. But he also prioritised, when it really came to it, British troops who were going to die of hunger as well. And as a British Prime Minister in a war, I'm not sure you can necessarily blame him. Now,
which I've heard, and I totally agree with that.
So my point is that it's very easy to say that Churchill caused the famine and the death of 4 million people. But actually, when you get into the weeds about what happened there, that's simply not accurate historically.
Well, I said it was due to his decision making. Secondly, that's not the only thing that resonated with me. The second thing that resonated with me was the fact that he built Kenyan concentration camps. So please school me and tell me I am wrong. He built Kenyan concentration camps 7 years after World War II, 7 years after defeating fascism, 7 years after getting rid of concentration camps for Jews. He decided after 7 years of growth and learning and all of this peace and all of this amazingness that Britain has achieved, we're now going to build concentration camps, and not for Jews. This time it's going to be for Kenyans. And we're now going to start making pillars these kind of different instruments that literally crush and rip the testicles off of Kenyan men. And we're going to do that 7 years after defeating Nazism. So yes, I've got a different perspective.
We've heard the view, and it's a view clearly shared by a lot of young people. It's staggering, these new statistics now of people who really dislike.
By the way, I agree the treatment of the Kikuyu tribe in Kenya during that period of suppressing Mau Mau was utterly deplorable.
7 years after World War II.
From 1952 onwards, but
the mixture of monstrous and hero actually crush.
All right,
and
take one of my one of my heroes like Nelson Mandela. He was a man that many viewed to be a terrorist, and then he came out and he turned out to be one of the all-time great peacemakers. Now, again, do you take his life in totality, Mandela, or do you say that actually anyone involved in any form of activity which could be classed as terrorism is a monster, and therefore there is no chance for a public figure to redeem?
Did Nelson Mandela sanction making pliers that crushed and ripped the testicles off of black men? Did Nelson Mandela do that, Piers?
What he did sanction was he sanctioned activity which by today's standards would be construed as terrorism.
So we can safely say that, yes, everyone is mad. I'm not negating that point. The issue is,
my point, what Churchill achieved in World War II overrides everything else.
But why though? So why does that supersede the fact that He caused thousands, tens of thousands of black deaths, and potentially, again, it's arguable, but potentially his decision-making led to the deaths of millions of Indians. So what you're saying...
But that's not
the
true.
Deaths, but what we can say categorically is what I said about the Kenyan concentration camps. So if you think that the Kenyan concentration camps wasn't monstrous, then what you're doing is you're negating the thoughts and feelings and experiences of everyone else.
I don't actually negate anything that Churchill did on the negative side. I think a lot of the things he said were certainly racially tinged
But
at
what
best.
about the things that he did? What about the pliers I've just told you?
Yeah, no, we're not defending that at all. Right?
So,
but my point is, where on, right? But where did, I agree. But where on your balanced argument does the pendulum swing to saving the world from the Nazis?
I agree. No, so this is the thing. I'm not the extremist. I don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Maybe you're used to those types of guests here. I'm not that type of person. I believe in balance. So I actually agree with you. I think he did incredible things. But I think it's also important to acknowledge that he also did really monstrous things. And
he led this country to stand up against a fascist dictator who, like many of the leaders in the world today, many want to, China, Russia, North Korea, and more, want to squeeze free debate, the kind of discussion we have at the moment. We can go back, have our separate lives. We're not going to be put in...
We wouldn't be having it under Nazi Germany, right?
You know, what he did, or what he sanctioned as Prime Minister in the 1950s in Kenya, weigh all that, then that's real education. That's what history is about.
I mean, there are
disputing the fact that he is also a monster, and that is where the problem lies. But I also have to take into account that the Indian population that died, potentially because of his decision-making, probably wouldn't have called him a hero. I have to take into account that the men that were having their testicles ripped from their bodies probably wouldn't call Winston Churchill a hero either. So again, it comes down to an inclusive mentality. When you take into account everyone's feelings, it becomes a lot harder to then definitively say someone is a hero or a villain. Okay. What you usually do is say they are both. You take into account they are racist, you take into account that they are a hero, and you take into account that they are...
And to the final point on Churchill,
to the people that died, and that's what I'm trying to say.
Sure.
You're now putting your feelings and white people's feelings and Jewish feelings, British feelings above everyone else that had a negative interaction.
No, it's not about white people. You shouldn't. See that? I think you let yourself down when you say that.
White people, British people, Jewish people, the people that I typically, this is where I'm coming from, the people that I typically find defend Winston Churchill. There have been many black, let's be honest with ourselves here, but I typically find it's majority white because we have this real kind of admiration for the man. And so
he saved us from Nazi Germany.
But we have to take in consideration that
I don't think anybody thinks that Winston...
No, when it comes to the subject of human rights, it's not just for one race of people. Or when you use the word concentration camp, you think of Nazi Germany and the Holocaust. Black Kenyans were forced into concentration camps built by the British underneath Winston Churchill's administration. That is bad because nobody knows about a part of history which has been erased. When it's to do with the subject of race, people are badly sensitive. They feel no compassion and no sympathy when it's a black person or the black race face bad atrocities, graphic genocide such as the Rwandan genocide or the apartheid regime. Most people become badly insensitized to the subject. Their emotions switch off, not like if it's the war in Ukraine or white people facing some bad atrocity. Human rights and compassion is not just for one race of people. What Winston Churchill done was bad, was no different than Adolf Hitler caused concentration camps in Kenya, and it was because they were black why he didn't care. The same with the famine and starvation in Bengal, India. If it was white people suffering food deprivation, he would have made sure they had food to sustain them. It's badly dehumanising someone or degrading them on the grounds of race. Now I think more needs to be done to educate people of the bad atrocities that happened under the British rule in Kenya. The same as white Orthodox Jewish people remember the Holocaust and the bad atrocities that took place during the Second World War. I think the British public should remember the bad atrocities that took place in Kenya under British rule. I, myself personally, always remember the apartheid. It's been 3 decades since the apartheid regime had ended in South Africa. There's been no improvement for black South Africans. So I make it be my obligatory duty to remember the atrocities that took place during the apartheid regime, no different than a white Orthodox Jewish person and remembers Anne Frank and the atrocities which happened in the Holocaust. when it comes to the subject of human rights, it's not just for one race of people. We are all black people born in the United Kingdom are the Windrush generation offspring. It's important as a black person to identify with being British and embrace Black Britain. Black athletes like this make you proud to be British, as they took the sting out of the Union Jack and restored the flag, taking it away from the National Front. The black athletes have achieved so much and have revolutionised the Union Jack, taking it away from the far right. Black British athletes have won medals for Queen and country and defended Great Britain in the Commonwealth Games.
I believe that we can carry this on and carry on a legacy for our children and their children. So yeah, it makes me feel really proud.
We put down the future generation, the Windrush generation. And what I'm doing now is laying the path for the future, for other children and young people to take their place in society. The way of society has allowed me to take my place.
Immortalised in paintings, commissioned by Charles to recognise the immeasurable difference made by the Windrush generation. One of those faces is 97-year-old RAF veteran Alfred Gardner. He is one of just 2 surviving members from that maiden voyage.
It was cold. I wasn't the first one coming out, even though I could have been if I had known it would come to this. I could have been the first one off. My idea was to work and raise a good family. And I think I've raised a beautiful family. Yeah, I'm proud of it.
At Britain's busiest railway station, the National Windrush Monument stands prominently and proudly. Many Caribbean arrivals passed through London Waterloo on their...
And you helped make Britain what it is today, challenging Home Office past failures, failing to treat the Windrush generation and descendants with the respect they deserve.
I hope you enjoyed my beautiful film presentation of Black British history. I think all Black and Asian people who are second and third generation British as a birthright should use the same direct wording, take back the country. And if you know British history as a Black Asian person, I know Britain did badly exploit India and Black and Asian countries. Not on part of the Black continent of Africa was not British rule, if not came under white European colonialism. So once you identify with your own British history, then ask yourself this direct question: who's more British? Not to mention Britain was a driving force in the black slave trade. So once you know your own British history, as Marcus Garvey's famous words did say, a black person who does not know their own history is like a tree without roots. It's important as a black person to know Black British history and know your British heritage, not just from the slave trade, but also British colonialism. And as I had said, I was proud of the Black British athletes because they took the Union Jack, which had been strongly linked to the National Front, and they took away that bad stigma. So now when you see black athletes like Linford Christie or the Black British boxer known as Lennox Lewis with the British flag, they embrace Britain as it is their birthplace. All Black and Asian people should hold the same direct view and embrace the wording, take back the country. I hope this has been an educational and informative video documentary. Please watch my next instalment of Black British History. As Black History Month has been extended to a 6 weeks, up to 2 months on my new YouTube channel. Thank you, and see you in the next episode.
Seaport of West Pakistan, and it was here that the Queen, when she came to see for herself this jute mill in the
Both
world.
Pakistan and India was a part of the British Empire, and the Queen was the head of state. Direct result, we have a multiracial Britain.
Can look to the future with some of the most recent
That's why Britain has a large Pakistani community.
The soldier himself
The man behind the Queen is the Prime Minister of Pakistan.